Hi, I'm so happy to welcome you two onto Amory podcast. For our Amory listeners, I have such the pleasure to interview Dr. Joli Hamilton and her partner Ken. And I'm going to let you two introduce yourself and tell us how you got started in this crazy world of ethical non-monogamy. And then we will see where our story goes from there.
Awesome.
Sounds good. Thanks.
Thanks so much for having us, Megan. It's a pleasure to talk to you every time, but I'm especially excited to talk to you with Ken because, wow, I think you are one of the podcasts that totally embraces the messiness, and I'm psyched for that.
We've got some
because we have some. So you introduced me with my doctor title, and so I'll just say I am a research psychologist. That's my background, but all of that came because of the ethical non-monogamy. I actually decided to study psychology because of this, because it was so hard and so messy. I'm also a certified sexuality educator, and I am a relationship coach, as so many of us who have walked this long and wandering path are. And Ken has a different kind of background.
Yep, my background is all like science and computers and technology, and a background that did not prepare me in any way for going so deeply into the dynamics of human relationships.
And oh my gosh.
We make a joke that like in every non-monogamous couple, like there's one helping professions person and one IT person. Yep, I don't know why, totally. But we run into this so frequently.
I was just thinking about the dynamic between Marty and I, and that is my world. I was always interested in psychology, but I think this has really brought me to want to learn more, just like you. And then Marty spent most of his world was in the tech domain and starting his own tech companies. Yeah, it is a fun dynamic as well. I can so appreciate your path, and I really see both of you now stepping into wanting to educate more people, because the path, like you said, is so messy, but it cracks us open in such a beautiful way. And I would love to hear how this path of ethical non-monogamy cracked you both open to a place where you are now sharing openly about your own messiness in life and wanting to support other people.
Yeah. Oh, that cracked us open is, I think, the best way to put it. When we decided to get married after some of the messiness had subsided, we actually got married. So about halfway through our 13-year story, there's a marriage piece that comes, or a third of the way now. There's a marriage piece that comes in, and in that ceremony, we talked a lot about having melted the block of ice that Ken was in. And for me to find some balance to the fire and explosion that I had always been. And I think that's the trick for us to staying with this messy process has been to allow change, to allow that dynamic change of like, I was incredibly fiery and verbose and overwhelming and explosive. And he was incredibly stoic and locked up.
Yep.
And
inert.
And the messiness has been a way for us to become more us.
Yes, for sure.
Like, I don't think any other way of being would have been as efficient. Non-monogamy was very efficient at exposing the
fire and ice. I mean, we really do. Opposites attract, I think. And I think we have gifts to share with each other. And I love seeing the evolution of where you were. And then by you two being in each other's lives, how then you ended up really shifting and changing through your relationship. So bring us into a little bit of that world if you can.
Yeah. Ooh, okay.
Where do you want to start?
Well, one of the first things that I think of when we talk about the beginning is, so we talked about my background, technology, science, and all that, and the transition from that world of sort of logical positivism and certainty, which, as a side note, made me kind of a bad scientist, but that certainty and the quest for certainty, breaking open into an embracing of the unknown and my own ignorance. Without that, this would not have worked. If I had stayed in that locked up, I know what I'm doing, I will figure this out, and know what I'm doing at every step never would have worked. I had to open up to, I'm going to make mistakes. I don't know what I'm doing. Help. And if I had said help more often, even, that would have gone way faster, because I'm still trying to do it all myself. And that didn't, so that was where I came from. And that's like a really short version of how I got to where I could even participate in this.
And he's not kidding, though. He actually has a magic spell now for how he maintains that.
Mm-hmm.
He has like a 4-word spell for himself that reminds him. And it's so helpful to me, because he writes this thing, you would know it off the top of your head.
Yeah, I can't remember the first word right now, because, you know, podcast recording. Yeah, invite, accept, embrace. Oh, what's the last one?
It's gone. Invite, yeah, whenever you try
accept, yeah,
it'll come back in, I'm sure.
It will come back in. Yeah,
Sorry,
that's just what happens.
Clear.
It's just his personal process that I see it on the side of his computer. He has this little sticky note, and it just says these 4 words that remind him that he doesn't need to know the answer. And when we first got together, so we'd known each other our whole lives, literally our whole lives. I met him as an infant, but we weren't of the same like group. He's 10 years older than I am. So we weren't of the same group. We didn't grow up together that way. And when the two of us had that spark of romance that then generated all of this change, that frozenness, that certainty that he had, that very classically Western masculine type of certainty, it was really dangerous for both of us. It was really dangerous. And we didn't recognize that at the beginning, but this ability to invite and accept and embrace feedback and my feelings and everything has been what's made it possible for us to move out of the early stages of our relationship, which I think there's no other way to say it. It was borderline abusive, because I jumped out of the frying pan of a really, really, really abusive and toxic relationship where I was participating in that dynamic. I don't blame my spouse. I jumped out of that, though, into the fire of a triad that was really not educated, stable, or even capable yet of creating space for growth. Like, it wasn't.
That inertia, that I know I'm certain I know what I'm doing, meant that I didn't respond to what I saw in you.
Right.
And so borderline abusive, yes, past the border, on the other side of the border, because your experience of that was, well, it was damaging. I hurt you by the way I acted, because I thought I knew what I was doing. And over the time that
I would love to honor both of you at this point, because I think your story is a microcosm of what is happening in the world. And I think, Ken, you put it so well that it is and I'm going to say because this has been my path as well. And I see it in what's happening right now in our world, is that we so crave that certainty. And we actually have put all of our safety into that certainty of we know how the world is, right? And I have no blame or judgment for us, because I think as humans, like, this is just where we are in our conscious evolution path. And the work that you're talking about doing, and now being able to talk about it really nonchalantly on like your awareness and acceptance of how it was, is beautiful. I mean, I think that gives all of us hope to say, hey, no matter what we've gone through, no matter where we've been, it's okay. I mean, I'm sure you were doing the best that you knew how, given the tools that you had. And that point that you were talking about, starting to become more open to understand, well, maybe I don't know it all. Were there moments, like, was there a moment that started to shift in your relationship, or that started to break open between you two? Because that is both the pain and the learning kind of at the same time. And I'm sure listeners can so relate to this.
Right. For me, there was a beautiful moment when we crossed the threshold from each of us trying to fit into some idea of what we thought non-monogamy was, some idea of what it should be, to actively collaborating on, okay, what are we doing? Let's let's stop for a minute trying to fit a particular mold. And there weren't that many molds to begin with, because it, over a decade ago, we didn't have all the resources we have now. But we started making something together, which meant a billion conversations. It meant creating vocabulary, not just like taking vocabulary out of a book, but co-creating what the vocabulary meant to each other. And in that moment, I remember that moment coming when it was actually when I told you I wanted to marry you, because marriage was actually outside the paradigm, right? So we weren't supposed to do that. But everything in my being had been pulsing with this desire to ask this man to marry me, this person to marry me. And I didn't feel like I could speak the word. And then I finally, I spoke it September 9th, I think, of 2012. And when I did, that was a turning point, because I thought he would say something to the effect of, I hear you, that's beautiful, but I think that means that we're over. I really did. I thought that would mean we needed to transition to friendship or something. And instead he scooped me up in his arms and he was like, oh no, that's exactly what I want. We just had both been too afraid to say that it wasn't this cookbook version of here's how you do polyamory. It was in fact going to be our version, and our version included wanting to exchange some rings in front of our friends and children and look a little bit conventional because of it. And that was okay. More than okay.
That's beautiful. And you bring up such the opposite perspective, I think. When most people step into polyamory, they're looking to get out of that traditional concept of what marriage is. But it's almost in the deconstruction of it, you can allow yourself to really consciously step into it. And it's really funny that seemed like the taboo.
Exactly.
I got a lot to get married.
Exactly. We had spent 3.5 years railing against marriage, against the whole idea of it. And
which in retrospect is pretty funny.
It was pretty funny. The solution was right there in our own words. Anything that causes that much affect, that causes that much embroilment, right? There's your learning. And so when we found that, all of a sudden we knew we were going to have to really invent the whole thing ourselves. We were going to have to create a relationship that allowed us to experiment with monogamy, which was shocking, right? We had to, I actually insisted that we experiment, because I realized he had never really truly been monogamous, because he'd been open with his first marriage too. And I didn't know what it would be like to be monogamous with him. So we actually dipped our toes into the very strange waters of monogamy and found that wasn't a good fit either. So yeah, it was like the world turned upside down in this, oh, we had so staunchly decided that there was one way to do it.
Yes. Yeah.
That we forgot that it is always about co-creation.
Oh, that's so fun, you guys. It really is. And how did you level out? So what I hear is that you've tested multiple different arrangements, and that honestly, you probably continue to test, and based on your needs, what you need. You and we talked separately about the idea of fairness. And I think many people enter into polyamory, I think with good intentions. We're raised as kids to share, to be fair. I get the intention is there, but sometimes, you had a really beautiful take on fairness. And I know that Kyle and I have geeked out about fairness actually in the same genre. So I would love for you to share your take on fairness.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So first, right away, as soon as that topic came up before we got into this recording, I would not want to match Joli date for date. You go on a date, I go on a date. I don't want that many dates. I really don't. So if we tried to go for fairness, all that would do is develop a resentment and a sense of obligation, which isn't good for us. It isn't good for whoever I might be going on a date with. It's fairness is no, thank you.
But it was hard for us to get there.
It was,
because I think
that's the message.
There's the problem. The problem is that we conflate fairness with equal.
Yeah.
And then we equate equal with equal in numbers or quality or depth or something. We pick some metric by which we measure each relationship or each connection. And then we say, okay, let's step forward together in tandem, right? Especially if you're a couple transitioning. I primarily work with couples who are transitioning from monogamy, often after having been together for quite some time and having children and businesses together, right? So they want to stay together in sort of a lockstep. And when they equate that, I think they find the same thing we did. Often you realize really soon that your needs are not the same. Your desires are not the same. And so that is a lot like wearing a really itchy wool sweater for one or both of you. It's just not a good fit. It doesn't work. But if you do things that look from the outside like they're not fair, you face not only potential external judgment, because somebody might look and say like, well, that doesn't look fair. You might have, your sister might say, well, that doesn't seem fair, but also your own internalized sense of, is this safe? Am I okay? Because of that conflation. It's not a simple thing to figure out what fair is. And I wonder what you and Marty have done to untangle from this overly simplistic kind of fairness, which I believe it's done with good intention, but doesn't.
Yeah, I think culturally it shows us where we still have learning to do around looking at people's needs and meeting needs, and not just going for fairness as in, again, that one idea of this is the mold of what it looks like. I have to thank Marty, actually, because we started out and I fell in love with Kyle well before Marty really, I mean, maybe he had gone on a couple dates at most. So I think he opened up that door first for us. And I was so thankful because and honestly, to this day, I don't know how he did it emotionally, but I think he just was so conscious of what he wanted for me that he was willing to say, well, I don't know if it's possible for me, but here you go. Like, this is what you have available to you right now. And now it's kind of leveled off a little bit more, but I actually think it impacted more of my relationship with Kyle, because Kyle doesn't have another partner, whereas now Marty has another partner that feels like equal in that traditional sense of, look, this is how we split our time. But for the last couple of years, although Kyle has dated, he hasn't had a more long-term partner. And I think I still had that in my head as in, oh, this isn't fair. So I kept really pushing him to try to meet people, to go on dates, I got excited. I really do want him to connect with more people from my heart. But I think, though, that my pushing him created a tension in our relationship that didn't really need to be there, because we were still in the beginning of our relationship and still evolving together. And for him, it just wasn't there. It wasn't a fit. In fact, the more I pushed, the more it caused problems for him, for us. So now I've just kind of learned to sit back and say, well, it may not look fair from the outside that I have two partners and he has one, but at the same time, that's just where we're at. And there's an openness to it, but that's just what's happening right now. And so, yeah, it's just a different mindset. But there's so much cultural conditioning I had to let go of, like, oh, this isn't fair. It's not fair. It's not fair, but doesn't meet our needs right now.
Right. You know? So I focus so much on differentiation, and that helps me. If I can remember that we are truly different people, and that really, really giving Ken his agency fully, like allowing you to be fully autonomous and not just letting go of that desire for control, but really, handing back with full honor, this is yours to have. And watching him choose to not move in romantic directions with that agency, like, that's the gift. That's participating in this particular paradigm that we have chosen to live in. But it is really easy to get caught in like the Instagram moment of it and think like, okay, I want to be able to, we should both be able to post photos of other people. We should both be able to do, and miss the fact that true agency is allowing him his choice, your path. That's just yours. And that's been a gift, because now you pursue other things with that time that aren't necessarily romantic, but are just as valuable to you in your growth as a human. Yeah,
because my path isn't your path. The way where I feel a need to grow isn't where you feel a need to grow, because we're not the same person. And honestly, that has taken some work to remember that we're not the same person. At the very beginning of our relationship, I was and from your stories, you were trying to be me, I was trying to be you, but that was never going to work.
Yeah.
And it took quite a while to untangle that. And in some ways, I still am still like extracting myself from enmeshing with you. And what you said, Megan, about hey, you go on dates now because I'm going on dates and you go on dates, and that's an experience we had as well. You would try to encourage me to go on dates, and I didn't feel it as encouragement. I felt it as an obligation put on me, and it wasn't strong enough for me to feel like I needed to bring it up and say, look, you have to stop this because this is a problem. It was just a little pressure. It's like, I have other things that I'm working on. And I kind of like the idea of other relationships, but not as much as some of the other things I want to spend my time on. And so we work through that to where we are at now, which is by no means perfect, but now I have a little better sense of what I actually want to do. And part of the clarity is because I'm not trying to respond to your wishes for me anymore,
which easily turned to feel like judgment, right?
Yes.
Like really easily. It's when I see people struggling, when I see clients struggling with this, one of the things that often is happening, this is something Ken has experienced a lot, is taking responsibility for my feelings, but not even just as a fixer, because certainly most of us will try to fix our partner's feelings at some point or another, but he would actually enter my system really and take on my feelings, my emotions, as if they were his own, and try to fix them sort of from the inside. That was early days stuff, but it lasted a long time and became habituated. And when we started to try to break this apart and really be two actively autonomous human beings, it was the kind of pain that comes from growing up. It's the same kind of pain you face in puberty, or like letting go of your, like really, it's such intense pain to say, oh, I'm going to actually let you have your feelings entirely. I'm not going to enter into your system, and I'm not going to take responsibility, but I'm also not going to kind of suction off, because what we found was, in many ways, it wasn't a giving move. It was a usurping. It was like, I'm going to enter into this, and now I couldn't as the person who'd been swept into the emotion, I couldn't actually have the full experience of my state of being, because he had moved in and now he was having it. And now what was my role? And a socialized female, I was moving into, now I need to fix how he's feeling. And oh my goodness, wow, now there's no way for me to have my feelings at all. Oh, we were so caught.
This is a mess.
And it's so frequently started because we had this imbalance in what we were doing that then led us into this weird codependent enmeshment that was it was not healthy, regardless of what our relationship structure was.
It wasn't.
It wouldn't have mattered.
I want to throw in one little thing that I don't think I've ever said before. But I don't think this is going to come as a surprise to you, which is, okay, so you're feeling things, and my response has been to step into your system, take on that feeling, try to fix it, try to do something with it. And there have been plenty of times where the reason I did that was so that I didn't have to deal with my feelings about watching you have yours. So I stepped into it and just made it your problem. So now you have two sets of feelings to deal with. So not good, but it took me a while to really see, and you said many things that were very helpful, to see that, oh, wait a minute, this is entirely about me masquerading as, let me help you. And still respond sometimes to my offers of help as, hey, don't you put that on me. I was like, wait, no, I'm honestly trying to help. Sometimes that's true. Sometimes it isn't. Sometimes I'm looking for something from you.
And it makes sense.
It's very complicated.
It makes sense because the way that we're socialized, like he was socialized in this very specifically Western masculine New England, microculture, right? And it would make sense that your feelings for my feelings would be easier for you to feel than your own feelings about your own feelings.
That's right.
Oh my
Ugh.
goodness. Can you see the patterns that we just get into? I mean, we don't know any better really, because this is just where we're at, but you can see where we get into these whirlpool effects of just staying locked into a certain behavioral pattern. Oh, you both brought up so much that I wish I could go down 5 paths of questions here. You brought up agency, which is amazing, and enmeshment. I think that comes up so often in this world. And Joli, what you said too about it felt like growing up. It felt like, I don't know if you used the word adult, becoming an adult in that painful process. I actually had this realization the other day where I feel like I'm only now becoming an adult thanks to this path. And it's so interesting to know that this path is always available. I don't think necessarily people have to go down the polyamorous route, but it does speed things up a bit, doesn't it? If there's anything else in there around your own enmeshment that can help people understand that if they are there, that there's hope to separate out a little bit. I know in my experience, it has been really allowing Marty in particular, because that's the long-standing relationship, Marty to feel his emotions and to not step in because Ken, I was doing what you were doing and I didn't know the impact of it. So I can share that particular learning, but anything else that you have there to normalize really the process that you went through and that others are going through.
Yeah, this is wicked important because I was raised in a house where codependence was actually, it was taught explicitly. My father introduced the concept of codependence as like a valid relationship choice. And he was like, your mother and I are codependent and we like it that way. And so I, at 16 years old, picked somebody out, married him, and just thought that literally, I say living in another person's system because that's what it feels like, just actually inhabiting one body. I thought that was not only a normal variation, but the norm. Like I thought it was what you aspire to. And Ken grew up in a very different setting with parents who had much more autonomy and agency, but because he hadn't felt truly like really embraced in love, when we came together from my place of, okay, we do this is intentional, and I will just like surround your being with my being, and from his place of needing and wanting to feel that delicious drowning that codependence is, right? It was a beautiful, horrible way to be because we just became like one glob of energy. And because I hadn't studied what I'd studied and you had studied nothing, you had explicitly tried to be outside
avoided
of the human realm
of human relations.
Actively avoided. Oh my goodness. Yes. As so many of us do. Yeah.
I just grabbed on to the outsider / bystander observer role.
The Spock role.
That was it. Yeah.
The Spock role.
Not even human. I'm just over here watching all you guys do your thing. That's not good.
Right.
That's my thing too. And so anyway.
So the thing is that we both came to that codependence, that space where there's no longer any chance to develop two separate pathways that really walk alongside each other from very different places. But the healing, the place where everything started to open up again, for our individual souls, was in recognizing that we were hurting each other and taking responsibility for that. And he went first. He totally went first. I give him a lot of credit for it. You took a moment where you might have just bailed because our children we have 7 kids between us who we've been raising together for 13 years. So like they are our family. At a time when the kids were feeling banged about by all of this intensity and we were both struggling, he heard me expressing this. I felt like I'd been swallowed and I couldn't really put full words to it, but I was saying all these things to him about feeling lost, feeling not myself, feeling like, oh my God, I don't know whether I want to do this mom thing like this anymore. I can't do it. I don't want to be super mom. And all of these words that really, I look back to them and I think, wow, it might have sounded like I wanted to just bail on the whole damn project, including all of our everything. It might have sounded like that. And there was a moment sitting by the river we live on where he leaned in and said, well, then we're just going to have to reinvent it. we're just gonna, I don't know what we're gonna do, but we just have to. And I'm getting chills just remembering it, because what you were volunteering to do was get really freaking uncomfortable, because I dropped all of my mom's stuff. I was like, okay, cool. Let's switch we just switched everything in the house around. Whatever we had been doing, we experimented with doing it different. So he started doing all of the caretaking, and I started earning money, and we just flipped the switch on so much stuff all at once. And your bravery to say, like, let's do that. Let's just try. I don't think I would have. I was willing to say the things, but I wasn't willing to pull the switch, right? Like, actually do it. And that's what led us to the new life.
Yep, that's what got us there. That got us into the mode of reinventing everything that was us, anything we touched. I have always been ready to just throw everything away and start again.
That's amazing. That's amazing, Ken.
Wish I'd leaned into that a little earlier in my life, but it's been there. And so that was a spot. And that it's only recently that I came up with that magic spell. And the reason that I remember the first couple of words specifically is the most important thing for me was the invite. Because for me, that is reminder that I asked for this. Nobody's asking me to do this. I am inviting this myself. And I'm doing that every day, all the time. And when I forget is when things start to go bad. When I'm like, oh, I don't want to do this. You who are making me do that. No, I decided. And so there's that agency coming up again, which I was so much more willing to give you your agency than to take mine.
Right. But to move away from codependence, in that moment when he was like, well, let's do something different. The something different for me was to stop being responsible for everything, to be irresponsible, to share
responsibility.
Right. And literally, right. For me, it was like literally to not have to be the person doing all the emotional labor, all the everything, right? Which I had been trained to do. I was born to caretake. That's what, I was literally born to caretake for my family of origin, who are all dead now. I walked them all through their process, and I didn't know another way to be until he let there be enough space between us for me to say, oh, I could just in this moment decide to care about how I'm doing. Am I alive? And I didn't think moms got to do that. There's the God's honest truth. I just didn't think moms got to do that.
Can we geek out here on just a minute? Because I think, again, you are the microcosm to what I see so many people going through and what I have gone through. The caretaking roles and how prescriptive they are, because in reformatting and in creating a new relationship, it's also a release of the roles that have really been imposed on us by our social conditioning. And I think that caretaking role as primarily the female role, and it being not valued in society, because it really isn't. We don't give a lot of value, both monetarily or culturally in importance for that caretaking role. And so that already is an imbalance, but then also women feeling like that they have to take it on. And I've had to work through this very personally. I'm so lucky. Next week, I think I'll release this podcast first. And then next week I interview Rian Eisler, who is really known in the space. She wrote a book, The Power of Partnership, The Chalice and the Blade. She's really all about this concept of domination versus partnership models in society. And I just so see us going through this revolution, going from the domination model, which we don't realize we've ingrained in ourselves as well, and going through the hard work of unlearning that and going to the partnership model. And the whole reason I'm inviting Rian Eisler, she's not polyamorous, she has nothing to do. She's a 90-year-old woman that is a Holocaust survivor with her family. I mean, she is brilliant. And for me, the reason I want to have her on there is to start giving language to what I see the polyamorous community doing, which is unlearning this model, going to the partnership model, and the growth path in between. So I wanted to point it out because I see that in you and what you've had to rebalance. And how did that, and I'm just so curious, so how did that feel? What was that, you stepping up into that role of, okay, I want to be the breadwinner, I want to make money, I want to have that role, and Ken, for you to go, I value the caretaking of our children, and that is important as well, and let's flip-flop, let's switch, let's what can you share around that piece? Because I think that that's also a learning path for many, many others.
Yeah. I want to share something really practical because you said, let's do this, let's flip flop. And here's the thing. We weren't in a position for me to replace his salary. I was not encouraged to go to school when I was a kid. I didn't have, and I had my first child. I got pregnant when I was 22 and then had a baby every 2.5 years for like 1,000 years. And, I didn't have that. I couldn't just say, oh, I'll go get a job and you stay home. So instead we had to get really creative. And that creativity is, I think, what birthed this new version of us. Because what it looked like was him saying, okay, well, if we want to do this, I had made it clear I was going to need to go to school. Okay, I'll go to school. Cool. So, well, I'm going to be spending money. So obviously he needed to keep making the money that ran our household. And he still volunteered to step into that caretaking role. So he did what any working mom I have ever met does. And he just was like, okay, I'm in charge of running this household and I make the lion's share of the money until such time as you are complete in your education. Now I 3 psychology degrees later, almost 4, almost done with that 4th one.
Wow.
And I'm fully in my business and I love it. And now I am able to meet him there in that financial place, but watching him take this on and not heroizing it, not being like, oh, wow, what a super dad, because he can do all, he was just doing what so many people do. He was making sure kids went to doctor's appointments and doing his work. It's so normal. It's so entirely normal, but because he was brought up the way he was and I was brought up the way I was, it sounded like this.
It sounded revolutionary. Yeah.
And it really is that practical. Like we could talk all one side and down the other about the spirituality of it and how it felt for us. And that's all great. But in this very practical sense, it was about, I stopped worrying about whether the kids got to their dentist appointments. And when they missed a couple, I'm like, okay, so I guess you're going to have to reschedule that. And I really had to let him learn how to juggle those balls. And it was hard because I had taken responsibility for everyone's life, my whole life.
Yeah,
so this was at like
your patterns.
Oh, like I didn't know who I was. I didn't know who I was. I was like 37 at this point, and I had no idea. He started taking care of my elderly father. And like, if my father had an accident or probably like messy stuff, like he was very unwell, he would take him to his doctor's appointments. My father was not happy about this either because my father was the one that socialized me to take care of him, right?
Wow.
And I was like, wow, this man is going to take care of you. And I should say that Ken is on the non-binary spectrum, but in
it's
in
not
these
immediately
ways,
obvious.
in these ways, this was a man showing up to do these things.
Yeah.
And those are the things. It's changed who our children are. It changed who I am because now 10 years later, because it's been 10 years of practicing this, and it's only been about 3 or 4 of it being competent. Like the first 7
4
years
is a stretch.
It's a stretch.
Well,
we didn't know what we were doing.
Nope,
but
I
get
didn't know what I
practical
was
about
doing.
it.
I didn't understand the scope of it, but after a fairly short amount of time, I consciously took my white, middle-aged, middle-class, unearned confidence and applied it to taking care of the house. And it was hard, and it was an adjustment, and it wasn't just logistically hard. I'm not as good at seeing the whole picture as you, and I've had to stretch, but it was also overcoming that emotional belief that I'm not supposed to have to do this, which also led to I'm not supposed to have to learn to do this.
Right.
I had to open up to knowing I wasn't doing it well and learning how to do it better.
I love this conversation so much. I really do. I just feel like this is the path that we all walk if we're gonna explore relationships like this. It creates the context in which, if you're in a traditional cisgender relationship, for the man to have to step up and take care of the kids more, and for the women to let go of control and responsibility and ownership of that, and I have to say, and even martyrdom of that, just like, let that stuff go. And it has been for me such a wild ride, and I'm so thankful shift from the time that we brought them home from even in the hospital, changed all of the meconium diapers and took 2 months off so he could help be there with the kids and always cooked our meals. So I was already in a partnership that felt, more equal, if we're going to use that word, more fair in the household duties than I see a lot of people. And it's still stretched both of us, leaving for days on end. And even for me, having to own the desire to want to leave for a couple days to be with another partner. Whereas before we opened up our relationship, I would leave a couple days for work. And that was totally fine. I could justify that because I was earning money. But to leave a couple days to be with another partner that I loved was like, there's so much mental, emotional growth work that happens in all this. And then letting him step into the role and trusting and having confidence and being able to go through that together. It is, it's just such a beautiful ride. So thank you for even pointing out too, that it's not like it's abnormal. These are people. And if it was the mother role of stepping in here, it would have been like, oh yeah, working mom and can do all this. But still culturally, we're still so conditioned that if the dad does it, that it's abnormal. Where I do see this community really leading the way in being able to meet those needs of all the people involved in the relationship and the family and the family duties. It's really beautiful to watch unfold. And I imagine a future, a generation from now where more people have practiced this and what that world might look like. So to all of you listening out there working through these same challenges, I just feel like that is, you are part of this shift from the domination culture to the partnership culture and all the learning that is involved there. Whew, sorry for the monologue there. I just get very, very passionate about this topic. But I would love to hear more about your work, Joli, and now Ken, I know you're stepping into facilitating and doing group work. And I'm so excited for you to tell me more about the work that you're doing with clients, what lights you up these days, and more of what you've got. If people love I'm sure people are going to love your story and what you've already shared here, but how can they learn more about that?
Yeah, well, thanks. We're at an interesting spot. You're totally right. So I went through that psychology direction, like I'm going to learn how to do this well, and the sexuality education. So from that perspective, I help people go through the process of transitioning from monogamy to some kind of non-monogamy, not just one, like not a cookbook version, really like whatever it is that they want, and do that really intentionally. For a long time, I've been doing that couple to couple or triad to triad, just like I get in there with them and spend a year or so doing that. And it's great. I love it. And I'm now starting my first group opportunity. And again, we're sticking with that year long. The group is called the Year of Opening, because my experience and Ken's certainly shows that it takes time. Time is an ingredient in the process. So I want people to fully understand that you're going to come into a group and just go about your life, doing the best you can, flubbing and having great successes, and enjoying the fact that you learn about stuff in that group setting, and we all learn from each other. And it's really exciting to me to get to include Ken in this, because while he didn't come with the same background I did,
right,
he's been right here learning alongside me and doing all the same reading and like getting into it, but from a perspective of entitlement, of a lot of entitlement. Yep. And so he adds something so generative because he's had to consciously set those things down. So this evolution of my work, which is now our work, into the Year of Opening, is, I feel like, the next step for contributing to what you're doing too, that this regeneration. How do we move? How do we shift paradigms completely? No matter what kind of relationship you wind up choosing for yourself. And you can find out more about me at jolihamilton.com and more about the program. And we have a podcast too. And you've been on it, and I can't wait to release your episode. Ken and I talk together. We just have these conversations on project relationship
that we do and how our relationship works.
It's, I think, much different from other podcasts in one way, which is we will talk about any topic just so long as we care about it. So it's not all non-monogamy. We talk about parenting. We talk about how we decided to choose this unconventional path and what it's done to our lives. And all things sex related, because that's just fun to talk about. It's just fun.
It really is. Oh, I love it. Thank you so much. And I love that you're focusing on the year-long opening up. Oh my goodness. I mean, I'm just hitting that realization as I created the Polycurious course, and it's only 4 weeks. And I'm like, that's kind of, it's a blip on the radar. It's like a little baby dip your toes in this conversation. But I love your focus. And I can only imagine the people that participate in that, the amount of growth over that year is just unbelievable. And to have a guide, God, I'm thinking back on it. Like, man, if I had a guide when I opened this up and had a group to go to for a full year to be like, this shit is hard, or I feel like I'm doing it wrong, or, oh my God, my relationship is going to fall apart. But so much in there. So I really do hope people take you up on that offer to step into a year's growth, really intentionally. And you've used that word a couple times while we've been speaking, intentionally, consciously. And that's what I hear when both of you speak, is that this really present love really that comes through on for yourself, compassion for your own growth process, and so much compassion for all of the people out there that are inviting themselves to go on this path and owning it and taking responsibility for everything that comes up. I'm so grateful that you're out there doing this work, and I hope more and more people find you. I know you and I connected, Joli, because of the Vogue article, which I would have said in the introduction already, but I think that has been, your work has been so highlighted. Your TED Talk is amazing. Your work on jealousy that you've done, it's extensive. So for any of you that enjoyed this conversation, please go down this rabbit hole. Go to jolihamilton.com, check out all of her work there. And check out the podcast. I will confess I haven't listened yet, and my life has been a tad bit busy. And honestly, I've had 3 face-to-face conversations with you in the last month, and I'm just soaking them all in.
You know what? I completely forgot to tell you, because it's so brand new. I just released a quiz. So if people are on the fence and they're listening to this, they can go to joliquiz.com and take a 2-minute quiz. I made it out of my research to just see, like, where are you? How ready are you to open up? Because not everybody is, and that's okay. And there are so many resources. Megan exists, and I exist, and there are so many more of us. Somebody's going to be the right fit for where you are. So I made this quiz out of my research because I was like, oh, a lot of people just need to know, where am I in this journey? And so that's my latest thing. Almost forgot.
Oh, I want to go and check it out now. Oh, that's wonderful. Wonderful. Yeah, we are all different points on this scale, and it's helpful to just orient yourself. Right. Become aware of where you're at on your path. So thank you. Oh my God, I could talk for hours with you two. Thank you for your time. I know that you're both very busy. You've got house renovation, 7 kids, businesses, all the things. So thank you. And I would love to say to be continued and have you on at some future point in here. And hopefully we'll get a chance to do some fun projects in person. Just going to put that teaser out there and say to be continued. Stay in the loop. But thank you too.
Thanks, Megan.
Thank you, Joli.
Thank you.